Welcome to Books in the World. I'm your host, Harris Thompson. Books in the World is produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and Cape Media Center. The Writers Center was established over 6 decades ago and sponsors a 4-day writers conference every summer on Cape Cod. The show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest running program of its kind in the U.S. Today, we are delighted to welcome Elisa Metcalfe, author of Street. To kick things off, Elisa, tell me something. What's something that's made you smile in the last day or two?
Funny you should mention that. I had somebody recently reached out to me on my website to tell me how much they enjoyed reading the book and how much they felt it and how much it meant to them, and that was really cool.
I'm going to thought you were going to say something about a rabbit.
Oh.
Your rabbit, Dennis Hopper. Let me introduce Elisa formally. Elisa is a member of Grub Street, the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, and is vice president of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Her debut novel, Street, was finalist for the Next Generation Indie Book Awards and the National Indie Excellence Awards. It was also a Literary Titan silver medalist. I want to read, you've got some great reviews here, I'm just going to read a few clips. One's a brilliantly orchestrated tale packed with riveting drama and raw emotion. This novel's setting in the 1970s is rendered with meticulous attention to detail, encompassing the era's unique cultural tapestry. And this one says it's a blend of gritty realism and psychological depth.
Wow.
So, Street's, in many ways, a book of survival. And I was wondering if you could describe, some of the challenges facing your protagonist.
Yeah, there are many. So the protagonist is Johnny Alvarez, and he's 12 when he finally is able to escape his abusive home, and he winds up on a bus going to as far as he can possibly get, the first bus leaving from his Miami home, and he lands in New York City. And it's 1970s. So it was a time when the city was suffering its own struggles with, they were borderline bankrupt. There was a shortage of, police and garbage people, coupled with the fact that, the Vietnam War was coming to a close. There were a lot of veterans who were not receiving the help that they needed, so there were a lot of people on the street. Drug problems, housing crisis. A lot of landlords would burn buildings for the insurance money rather than try to rent them. And there's a lot of flight from the city. It's a particularly gritty time he finds himself in.
And as a 12-year-old boy, he's sort of like he's made himself an urban castaway. He's got to remake he's got to find a home. He's got to remake a family of sorts and support systems.
He does, and he comes with an attitude that anything would be better than what he came from, and he's probably right. He tells himself that he would rather die on some unfamiliar street than spend another day in that house. And he's a bright kid. He's a resourceful kid. Charismatic.
And all your characters, it's really, first of all, it's really a story of also like buoyancy and transcendence. All the characters are faced with challenges, and they rise above them with optimism and good humor. And it's just a great cast of characters. They're all, really compelling. Pick 3 of your favorite characters. Describe 3 of them.
Oh, now you can't do that. I love all of them, even the ones that have much smaller roles. I've been living with these characters for a long time. Even if it doesn't show on the page, they each have extensive backstories. In my own mind, anyway. So, obviously, Johnny is primary. but yeah, he because of his charisma and smarts, and people are drawn to him, and he quickly makes friends. Starts, slowly at first. These new characters gradually find their way onto the page, and then their little gang grows as the storyline goes on.
Yeah, describe a couple of other gang members that are
Oh.
some of your favorites. I have mine too.
Okay, well, Clyde DeMarco and Jared King are the first two kids he meets, and they're New Yorkers. They're latchkey kids. Clyde is the son of his three sisters and a single mother who works 3 jobs, so she's very absent. But they have a pretty tight-knit family. So despite the fact that there's a lot of negligence, parental negligence, and there's no father in the picture, they kind of make do and cook and clean and take care of the house and stuff, but on their own. They take initiative to help their mother out, because despite the fact that she's working all the time, she's a good person, and if she had the time, she would probably be a really good mother. Jared comes from a slightly different type of household. His parents are chronic alcoholics, and they oftentimes don't know if he's there or not. And he's a single. He's an only child. That's what I meant to say. And then he has a heroin addict uncle that sometimes crashes on the couch. And
the Brick is one of my favorites. He's one of Johnny's mentors, father figures of sorts. Can you describe the Brick?
Yes, the Brick is a low-level drug dealer who camps out in Washington Square Park. Older guy, 50s. He's been doing this a long time. He is a very seasoned dealer. He's not that ambitious. He likes, he's got he'd rather be safe and then greedy. So just through hanging out in Washington Square Park, the 3 boys, the Brick is always playing chess at the chess tables there, and he's a very kind of flamboyant player, where he heckles his opponents, so he brings attention to himself, and the boys love watching him play because he's just funny. And through some other circumstances, Johnny is able to catch his attention, and
probably by giving it right back to him. Right.
Right. There's that. So the two, become the Brick recognizes something in Johnny and starts to employ him for minor little things, but it grows.
Trying to think of Tiffany.
Tiffany, oh yeah, Tiffany, Clyde's older sister. She is just a real snarky, jaded, overworked teenage girl. She had to drop out of high school to help Clyde, Clyde's family, help the working mother pay some of the bills. But yeah, she's got a mouth on her, and likes to razz the boys when they're hanging out at the house.
And Margaret.
So Margaret comes into the story a little later. She's a lot of the book takes place in Central Park, or that's like one of the central meeting places for the gang and their cohorts and dealers and whatnot. And Margaret lives nearby in a penthouse. She is a high-end escort. But she's, she has a good sense of humor and sees the boys hanging out a lot, and will kind of, razz them and interact with them. And she becomes an ally for
Right.
Johnny also. Johnny has few adult allies. He doesn't trust a lot of people as he starts to amass his family of choice, which are these streetwise boys. He has obviously has secrets he has to keep, and he's very careful about who he brings into his circle.
And were they always, they struck me as erudite gangsters. Were they always in your mind, so, intelligent and good at school and
Yeah, so when I was growing up in the city around the same time, I came of age in the 70s, and me and my friends, 12, 13, 14 years old, were also latchkey kids, basically. And we spent a lot of time hanging out in the street. There was very little supervision. There was practically no discipline. And me and all my peers, I mean, this was nothing unusual. We would just hang out, but at the same time, I think we were hanging out with adults as well as other kids. And because of that, we were pretty bright, and some more than me, and articulate and artistic. Kids were graffiti artists and musicians from early on, and that's the way I see these kids. It was really a reflection of what I saw growing up. I think the New York City kids reach a level of maturity maybe faster than some kids. If you're not hanging out in the street and if you're in the suburbs, and something about the city just makes you have to grow up really quickly.
And Johnny's probably drawn to that type of kid also, but also he brings it out in them. You talk about his study habits, his study strategies.
Oh, yes. Well, when he lived in Miami, he was never eager to go home. So he would stay after school as much as possible for any reason. So he got in the habit of liking schoolwork, devoting time to schoolwork. And when he came to New York, that followed him. Also, being homeless, school was a great cover for him. He could get food there. They had lunch program and a breakfast program, and he was safer there, shielded from, say, truant officers. Or he wasn't at that point when he first moved to the city. Also, he wasn't sure people weren't looking for him. Was he on some poster as a runaway kid that somebody might see and report him?
It's interesting. You've got, it's as if you have two parallel plot lines. You've got him, you're moving him forward through time. Is it about 2 years, the scope of this book, 2 years?
2 or 3.
Yeah. And so, you move him, through these episodic chapters as he matures in his gang and his family. He accrues, more of a family. And then at the same time, you've got his past and the trauma of his past chasing him. So, you're moving him forward, really, compellingly and economically, but at the same time, his past chases him and is gaining ground on him, right up to the end. So it's did that happen organically or?
Well, it was a process. As through revisions and more revisions and more revisions, things fell into place. I think in the beginning, in the early, maybe the first draft, I was tempted to front load a lot of the information about what happened to him to explain, how he could survive on the street. But then, it made more sense to just pepper it in. So as you learn more about Johnny, you're slowly given more information explaining his past and how he's able to to get through some of the stuff that he encounters. Kids of abuse are often robbed of their childhoods, and they grow up very quickly, and certainly that's the case with him.
Yeah, it struck me the some of what happens to it in his home is cringeworthy, but it seems like you protect the reader just like his psyche protects him. He blacks out, or he forgets, and for the reader, it's at first glance it's like, do I really want to read this? But it's it's necessary, but also were you conscious of not overwhelming the reader?
Yes. Put everything in and then slowly take it out in revisions. That was my motto.
Right.
So some of it could have been kind of brutal at times, and it's difficult. It's difficult to write. I'm sure parts of it are difficult to read, but it's not untrue. These things are happening to children, and it's very real. So I tried to write it like that, but not. I don't think you have to really hit the reader over the head with it.
You get the picture quickly.
Yes, and sometimes less is more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I'm struck by how there's this darkness haunting him, but the book is so buoyant. They obviously they get into petty criminality, and there's some violence, but still there's always just sort of this buoyant spirit. And you don't, I guess you'd say they're morally compromised, but they're good at heart, and you root for them.
That part was really fun to write, like that aspect of it. That yes, there's this darkness that happened to him in his childhood, and then there's crime and violence that's happening to him and the gang in the cities. They're encountering some nasty people, and there's some retaliation, and drug deals go wrong and things like that. But the fact that they're always this gang of teenage boys, there's that humor there where they can poke fun of something. Even after a dark moment, somebody will crack a joke and just completely lighten the mood. And that seemed really authentic to me, and fun at the same time. A lot of fun to write.
Yeah, it's very fun. Do you want to tell the origin story of when you started to conceive of this, and there's a lot that went into it.
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up in that time period in New York City, but I was a pretty shy kid and pretty insecure, and my hands-off parents. So I had a lot of insecurities growing up, and then to come to New York City public school with that, feeling like that is not a good thing, because bullies sense weakness and tend to prey on people. So I was definitely, unlike this gang, I was more on the other side of, the tough kids crowd. So yeah, I mean, I grew up, I guess that's what I saw. Like when I went to school, I would see these kids marching up and down the block like they owned it. And I was just really envious of that, because they looked so confident and so tough, and like they could handle anything. So I also had a propensity for escapism. I spent, even from a very young age, I used to spend a lot of time just like making up stories in my head, and sit in a corner. I was fine, just play by myself and make up some kind of scenario. And that followed me for, until now. Still, it's still with me, to kind of mentally detach, which may sound psychotic.
It's great for a writer.
But yeah. So that turned into my sense of security, where when I was feeling like I couldn't cope, or I was feeling scared and unsafe in my world, I could just kind of turn it off and create these scenarios with these kids and this gang, and that that made me feel better and took my mind off of my own, whatever was going on in my own family and my own house.
One thing I was struck by is that there's no malevolence in their gang. They rough some people up, and sometimes but it's justified, because it's about it's retaliation or protection or turf, or you know what I mean. They don't. I can't think of any mean-spirited act that any Johnny or the gang.
No.
I mean, sometimes Johnny will take something too far because of his trauma and
Right.
PTSD, but there's no no mean-spiritedness in any of them.
No, I mean, he loathes bullies because he was bullied by his family, his brother in particular, and he doesn't want to be that person. But the flip side is the street might be turning him into that person.
Right.
That's always the thing that's in the back of his mind as he keeps getting pushed into more dangerous situations with more risk and more violence. Is he actually becoming that person?
Right. And the ending is very satisfying, and my favorite character shows up in the probably second to last chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about Marco?
Oh, Marco. Wow, yeah. Okay, Marco, I love Marco. Marco is, I mean, again, I love all these characters. Marco is a Colombian drug supplier. He is as much a user of his products as a seller, but he, again, is great fun to write. I mean, I've been to plenty of parties in the 80s. I know I've hung out with this guy. So he's very erratic, but also kind of tender in a way. And he's a complicated guy. But again, he sees something in Johnny, and Johnny sees something in him as well. He becomes another mentor.
Yeah, a father figure.
Ish.
Well, he'd like to be.
Yeah.
And so you leave, it's a satisfying ending, and yet the reader wants more. And so what's in store for the gang? Well,
Harris, because I've had this story swirling around in my head since I was a small child, there's the potential for a lot of books. And if the world wants them. I'm working on the second book now, putting the final revisions on that, and hopefully it'll be out by the beginning of 2025.
Great.
And, stuff's only going to get more complicated. The gang will continue to grow. Their ambition will continue to grow. And so will the crises they face.
Right. And then, do you have a series in mind? Does it keep going?
It could.
And has anyone contacted you from Netflix or?
No, but if you hear of anybody, do.
Well, it's extremely cinematic.
Yeah, I see it like that. That's what comes first, is the scene for me, and definitely the location. All the locations were really close to my heart, places I lived or people I knew lived or where I hung out. And in a lot of ways it's a love letter to New York City, because I feel a lot of love and appreciation for these neighborhoods and for the city as a whole.
Yeah, it reminds me of The Wire.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. What else? And you've got you have a website.
I do. I have admetcalfe.com, and there I believe you can read an excerpt from the book. The first chapter is there, as well as several short stories that have been published in a couple of different places over the years.
And you've got, can you tell us about Dennis Hopper?
Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper could take the stage. So I adopted a rabbit last year from the FSPCA and named him Dennis Hopper. And he is quite a character, and he will often interrupt my writing process with his adorableness.
And you post him regularly doing...
Yes, him and my cat get along, so.
Well, if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you'll find links to them through our website, capecodwriterscenter.org, through our Facebook page, and on YouTube. Thank you for watching Books in the World.